This is our 5th time running, and so we're so grateful to have you here. And for those of you that are joining us for the first time, we're so excited to have you and continue to build community. I'm Kelly Smith. I run the Institute for Social Work and Ecological Justice, and as always, so grateful to partner with Renee and Georgiana.
Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. Hello, everybody. So happy to see all the familiar faces and new faces today and be in this space with you all. As Renee just shared, I am a new doctorate as of May 5th. I officially walked and was hooded. So my primary eco-social work role is I work with the Institute for Social Work and Ecological Justice. I also represent the Institute or the International Association of Social Work with Groups, which newly has an ecological justice committee. So I'm involved with that as well. And I will hand it back to Renee.
Thank you so much. Thanks to both of you. It's always a true joy and pleasure to put this together with you both. And I was just saying to them before, I was like, this is the first year I'm not super nervous. So I hope that's a good sign. But it's sort of like riding a bike. At this point, we sort of know what to expect out of this day. We know we're going to walk away inspired. And we really hope that all of you are feeling really inspired by the end of today as well. So we have a schedule that will pop into chat. You might have seen it when you came on today. And I'm going to turn the logistics over to Georgiana to speak to a little bit more. But really, we'd love to hear from you where you are, where your feet are planted in the world today. We have folks internationally here for today's symposium. And as Kelly mentioned, this is our 5th year doing this. We started this in sort of like the darkness of COVID. We were all in our little homes doing our little thing, and we decided to start this conference, and it has really helped nourish a community that I know I was certainly searching for, and I think I can speak for my co-chairs as well, that this has been a beautiful symphony and synthesis of like-minded folks who are coming from all different places and spaces in the world, all different places and spaces in the work. And it's been truly an evolution of love and intentionality. So we are so happy to spend this time with you here today. We're together until 6 p.m. today, and like I said, we're going to drop into the chat the PowerPoint that has the schedule for today, along with the bios of all of the presenters that will be speaking today. We're not going to individually introduce everyone, but all of their information is posted there. And at the end of today's event, you'll also receive a participant toolkit that will have lots of information in it as well. So don't worry about not getting what you need in terms of information. We will definitely get that all out to you. So Georgiana, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Renee. So we just wanted to kind of get you acclimated a little bit to what's going to be going on in addition to what Renee just shared. So as folks had seen from the call for contributions, as well as the registration page, we did also offer an opportunity for all of you to contribute to a collective playlist. That's what you were hearing when you joined the meeting, and that's also what you'll hear when we're potentially taking any breaks if we do that. But really, in addition to that, we have our posters, which will be available. So all of that is going to be on that toolbox that Renee just shared with you. And we're excited to have those opportunities available. I'm super excited to also share that we did also get at least 5 contributions to our website. So if you were one of the folks who did contribute content to be on our website, what we'll be doing is we will be posting those over the next few weeks. They will be available on iswej.org or com. I always forget which we use. We'll put the correct website in there for you, but they'll be posted there, which will be cross-references and sent out to our email lists as well. So this is really an opportunity to also recognize the international contributions of this group, to really respect that not everyone can frequently make the time frames, because we're all coming from this from different places, different life roles. So we're really happy that we got some contributions to that asynchronous piece of things. Another thing that you'll see that will circulate throughout the day is, in the past, we've also created a document which is a contact information for attendees who want to opt to choose that and to include that information publicly for others. obviously public meaning only people who have access and registered for this event. So that will be made available for you. You can share in that, whether you're looking for collaboration, kind of your contact information. In addition, below that list, if there's any resources that come to mind that today's conversation sparked for you, you're more than welcome to share that on that document as well. Really recognizing that we can't do this work in a silo, so we try to make these resources and the folks who are presently doing this work as transparent as possible. So if you are in need of a break at any point, obviously you're welcome to turn your camera off and step away, and we will let you know kind of what's going to be coming up next throughout the day.
Thank you so much, Georgiana. Kelly, I'll turn it over to you, and I'm going to unpin myself and Georgiana at this time.
Sure. And thank you. As we've started each of our conferences and now this year, the symposium, we are going to begin with a land acknowledgement. And I think in the social work community, we know that the land acknowledgement is a formal statement just to recognize and respect the Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land here in the United States and, of course, elsewhere. And the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. This is important when reflecting on Long Island, which happens to be where the three of us are located, which in itself is a colonial name. The Indigenous name for the territory Long Island is Pomanak or Siwanhaki. So Adelphi School of Social Work and the ISWEJ acknowledge our presence on this traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Merricks, the Matinecoks, and the Settlecots people, among many others. We recognize that these peoples were forcibly removed from their homelands, and we take this opportunity to acknowledge the generations that have gone before, as well as present-day peoples. And with humility, we recognize and offer our respect with all and for all Indigenous peoples, their histories, and their ties to the land. We pay respect to their past and their present. We ask you to acknowledge, along with us, these communities and their elders, as well as future generations, and just to share with all that we do have a commitment to continue working on dismantling the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. And we are striving to recognize those interconnections with our work here in social work and in ecological justice. Okay. And with that,
Kelly.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. I'm going to pull up Dr. Nair, if you wouldn't mind
Yep,
introducing him. Thank you.
you bet. One of my favorite people here again. Thank you so much, Dr. Nair, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you, and grateful as always. And your bio is shared with all, but here it is, specifically just yours, and it could go on and on. So I love to see you, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. This is the 5th year I am attending this program, and I never miss for a dime. And I am coming from a great nation of Tatuana, that is in 40 miles north of Los Angeles. Place, the new name is Santa Clarita. What I'm going to do is I want all of you to close your eyes and take 3 deep breaths. I want you to concentrate only on your breath and count 1, 2, 3 to inhale, then count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to hold it, then count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to exhale. Do it 3 times, and I want you to only smile. Even if you don't feel like smiling, just stick your teeth out or show in your face you are smiling, and concentrate only on your breath. Do it 3 times. Inhale counting 3, hold it counting 6, exhale very, very slowly counting 6, then pause counting 3 and repeat it 2 more times. After the 3rd deep breath, I want you to slowly open your eyes and still smile in your face. Those who are skeptical, let me know. I can send you lots of article on the, even if you artificially smile, it makes a big difference, you know. And I know the world is here to stay, but we may be here only for few years in this world, but take care of yourself. That is the main message, and I want to pass it on to all of you. And do it in your own way. Look at the nature. They know how to take care of themselves also, but we are messing it up. So please make it a point. Do this deep inhalation and exhalation every day as part of your day. And I wish Kelly and all the organizers an excellent wishes for this seminar. And I am planning to be here, Kelly, and I will stay back until the end. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Murali. I always feel better after these moments together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Murali. Georgiana, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. So now that we've had a little bit of a breather and a reflective moment, we'll be introducing our keynote speaker. This is going to be Dr. Joanne Casatori, who is an internationally recognized expert on traumatic grief and a professor at Arizona State University. So I will turn it over to her.
Hey, can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Good. Hi. And can I do a share screen?
Yep, you should have the ability.
All
You
right.
should.
Perfect.
If not, let me know.
Not, yeah, there we go. Just got it. Okay, now where's my PowerPoint? Hold on just a second. Let me try it again because the PowerPoint is there. Share. There it is. Okay, got it now. All right. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Congratulations to Dr. Dolan Riley. It's very exciting once you get that done, and also relieving. I remember it well. So, I am the director of the Graduate Certificate in Trauma and Bereavement program at Arizona State University. And I was invited to talk about something I don't get invited to talk about very much, to sustainable communities. I'm also a sustainability scholar at Arizona State University as well. And today I was invited to talk about good grief support through a sustainable and equitable lens. And so I'm going to be talking to you today about that. I will tell you, it is a heavy subject. My area of both practice and research for 30 years has been in traumatic bereavement. And so we're going to be talking about that. And I'm going to be looking at this through a non-imperialistic, decolonizing grief care lens. And all of our practices are, of course, positioned in that way, as well as an anti-speciesist and anti-anthropocentric lens. So this is Aspen Vaughn, one of our therapists here at the Sella Care Farm, which I will tell you about very, very soon. Okay, this is from the writer Anna Quindland. Perhaps this is why grief is the least explored passage. The world loves closure, but loss is forever. And 2 decades later, something in you cries out at their continued absence. We are defined by who we have lost. Excuse me. And so that's really what we're going to be talking about today. The focus is going to be on people who are grieving as experts in their own experiences, and how we can approach grieving people at the micro, meso, and macro level with an anti-colonial, anti-imperialistic lens. I'm going to just talk briefly about traumatic bereavement and how and why it's different from non-traumatic bereavement. First of all, we know that bereavement just in general is not just an emotional experience, right? Losing someone we love very much, even if we're talking about losing our 98-year-old grandma who had a, quote, good death with hospice and pain well controlled, there are still effects that ripple outward, right? It affects our biological self, our emotional self, our social self, our psychological and mental, cognitive self. There are many, in our spiritual and existential self, there are many, many effects that ripple through, and not just ourselves and our families, but also we know this from research, particularly Native scholars like Dr. Maria Braveheart, intergenerationally as well. There are intergenerational effects. And so it affects all these aspects of the self. And when it's traumatic, the effects in the data seem to be more intense and more enduring. How we define traumatic bereavement in the research is the death of a child at any age, at any cause, the violent or sudden death of a primary family member, such as suicide or homicide, or any early unexpected loss, the loss of a partner or a spouse prematurely. Certainly no one expects to lose a spouse at age 40 or 50. Those are the kinds of losses that we identify in the data and in practice as traumatic. So I'm going to read some emails. These are actual emails that I'm reading that I've anonymized and using with consent. Dear Dr. Cacciatore, I am G from Germany, and I lost my daughter 4 months ago, very sudden due to heart failure. She was only 7 months old and was my first daughter, so this is her only child. I somehow try to navigate this horrible time. I read your book and felt understood. I go to therapy, and the last session blew me off. What she meant was kind of blew her away. She was very upset. It is already my 6th therapist, and I was so disappointed. And this is actually something that we commonly hear, those of us who practice in the world of traumatic bereavement. People go through lots and lots of therapists because very few people are actually specifically trained to work with this. She said, I told my therapist that I still have Elle's crib next to my bed, her playmat in the living room, and her high chair at our dining table. She told me that soon I should let go of her stuff or just keep a small box with memories. After she told me this, I broke down at home. Just the thought of it makes me so anxious. I feel pushed. It calms me down to have her things visible in our home. It stays her place. Is it okay if I keep her stuff the way it was, or do I really need to let it go? Another email. My firstborn daughter died in 1965. I'm 60 actually. And so this was the year that I was born. This bereaved mother's child died. I went through 5 marriages, 8 rehabs, and pushed everyone away in my family. My kids hardly talk to me now. My psychiatrist insisted I contact you for help. I'm now 76 years old. Please help me. My little sister died just after birth when I was 8 years old. My mother left me that day. She never returned, not once in 84 years of her life. Before she died, she made me promise to find my sister and buy her a proper headstone. One of the things that we know about traumatic bereavement is what the writer Catherine Ann Porter said, and that is, the past is never where we think we left it. My husband died by suicide, and I was the one who found him. No one says his name. No one asks me about my favorite memories. Few will approach me with compassion. Mostly people are afraid to talk to me about my grief. It's so lonely. And so the first thing I really want to address is at the macro level and societally, our attitudes toward grievers and grief alike are problematic for people who are grieving. This is just sampling of the literature. Grieving mothers whose emotions were invalidated by others tended toward more avoidance and suppression, believing their feelings to be, quote, inappropriate or abnormal. Social constraints around the death of a baby, quote, interfered with their ability to process the loss, promoted thought suppression, increased intrusive thoughts, and inhibited emotional adaptation. Another study. When controlling for other well-recognized risk factors for something, a new diagnosis many of you have probably heard of because it's been very controversial and I've been on the front lines of opposing it. It's called prolonged grief disorder. So when controlling for other recognized risk factors for prolonged grief disorder, only negative cognitions of one's own grief predicted class membership to the disorder category. So negative thoughts about our own grief. Well, where do you think those negative thoughts about our grief come from? We live in a culture that pushes the happiness cult. Social constraints predicted poor psychological and physical health outcomes post-bereavement. This is very important. Social constraints, that is the pressure by others to feel okay, to be happy. That's emotional labor for people. And in a way, it's the colonization of other people's emotions. And increase the risk of post-traumatic stress and trauma survivors by impeding process processing of trauma content. So in other words, any kind of social constraints actually can cause an iatrogenic effect, can actually cause that which it's intended to help support. And this was a study by Westgate conducted about a decade ago that clinicians distancing language increased suicide risk in veterans. We have a problem in clinical practice today, and that is that we are not teaching emotional intelligence. From a study in China, existential isolation, that no one shares their feelings, increased class membership to prolonged grief disorder. Perceived stress and low social support increase prolonged grief in, they called it she-do parents, parents who lose an only child. And emotional loneliness and prolonged grief are related, which makes sense. Anyone who's ever felt loneliness, you can imagine why those are related. And so interestingly, this is a critique of the psychiatric nomenclatural system, and I'll stay in my lane and I'll just talk about grief. But yes, you could extend that argument into other diagnoses as well, particularly as it comes to something like post-traumatic stress disorder that does not consider childhood trauma context, for example. Notably, only persons with prolonged grief disorder were attributed relatively more negative characteristics and elicited more anger, anxiety, and a larger preferred social distance. In other words, just being diagnosed with prolonged grief disorder actually seemed to create stigma in this particular study, and it has been since replicated into other studies, that sense of stigma. I'm going to move through these slides pretty quickly because I'm setting the foundation for an alternative approach to the current very colonized mental health system and the ways in which grief is treated, and proposing that there may be alternatives for bereavement care that are community-based, but also that could overlay into other populations, particularly vulnerable populations. So we conducted a study that was published in the Journal of Affective Disorders, and we found that 34% of the entire sample met the criteria for prolonged grief disorder, but the average of time since loss was more than 10 years. And this is significant because prolonged grief disorder can be diagnosed after just 1 year in adults and 6 months in children. And we see that a significant minority of this sample could actually meet the criteria as many as 10 years after the loss. Bereaved parents had the highest rate at almost 42%, followed by spouses and partners at almost 34%, and siblings at 29%. It was a nice, robust sample of 1,137. Among those who were bereaved just 1 to 2 years, the rate for likelihood meeting the criteria of prolonged grief disorder was actually 54%. So more than half the sample could have met the criteria. And this begs the question, are the criteria wonky, right? Are we setting unrealistic expectations for people who have experienced traumatic bereavement? The interesting thing, taking it a step further, is we ask them, do you believe that your responses to your particular loss are understandable and normal? And 98% said yes. And then we went on to say, if you were told by a provider or professional that your grief was a mental health disorder, how helpful or unhelpful would you find this? And only 4% said it would be very helpful, and only less than 8% said somewhat helpful. The vast majority of respondents said it would be either very unhelpful or somewhat unhelpful. And yet, with these diagnoses, we persist. Grievers do need support. And so the argument can be made that, yes, but we need a diagnosis so that we can provide support. Yes, I agree. We absolutely do need support for grieving people. In a study that the proponents of prolonged grief disorder did themselves, they put forth this question to people like what kind of support is the most important to you? And interestingly, the number one preferred venue for support was support groups. And we don't actually need a diagnosis for support groups. Support groups is one beautiful, very community-based intervention. This is a letter that we got 4.5 years later. We lost our only grandchild in a car accident. I thought over these years how much our daughter could have benefited from being at the care farm. More information about the care farm is forthcoming. She was driving the car that day, not under the influence. During her brief life, our daughter struggled with many issues, but after her son's death, her drinking ramped up. She died in August this year from liver failure, but really it was from 4 years of a broken heart. And absolutely, grieving people need support. For 30 years, I've run a nonprofit that supports grieving people without the necessity of a diagnosis. Why are others essential, though, in helping grievers? Well, Dr. Murthy, our former US Surgeon General, had talked about the epidemic of loneliness in 2023 and came out with this big press release saying that we are in a real epidemic of loneliness and that there are some really, really strong effects. Well, loneliness is one of the defining characteristics of traumatic grief. And we know for sure that loneliness has an impact on the physical health. So some of the data: poor social relationships is a social determinant of poor health outcomes, including premature death. It increases mortality risk from all causes, equivalent to things like smoking. Unsupportive relationships are associated with a 29% increased risk of heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke. It's associated with higher rates of capital D depression, capital A anxiety, in the form of anxiety disorder, not otherwise specified, and even suicide. Interestingly, among patients with heart failure, there was a 4 times greater risk of death and a 68% increased risk of hospitalization, 57% increased risk of ER visits in people who were lonely, who rated high on loneliness. Thwarted belongingness, withdrawal from others, a lack of connection are significant risk factors for suicidal behavior in bereavement. And we know that loneliness and prolonged grief disorder live very close together. Conversely, the benefits of social connectedness, I don't need to tell you, you're all social workers, but improved physical, emotional, and mental health, stress resilience, and also lots of improvements on biomarkers of our physical health. So I'm going to tell you about a study that we conducted. We looked at good grief support. And rather than go to the literature and the scholars, we went to the grievers themselves and we asked them to define who is providing the best support to you and what does good support look like for you. We used House's framework for understanding understanding social support, which is listed here. Sample 372, predominantly female, white, and married. Snowball sampling with anonymous online instrument, cross-sectional. The vast majority of the sample, 75%, experienced the death of a child. The rest, a spouse or parent and sibling. What was supportive? It means having a community of people who are safe to share your journey of grief with, who don't try to fix or hurry you, people who let me say her name and tell me stories about her. I don't think any of you are surprised by these data. Support groups have been the most helpful, knowing there were others who truly understand, consistent communication, acceptance of my feelings, allowing me space as needed, listening without trying to fix or belittle my grief, people who check in with me, willing to listen, hold space, people who send cards months and months even after, bringing food, buying gift cards for our family. Okay, so what were the negative things? By the way, this is Sierra, who is one of our clients here at the Care Farm, and her twin brother, Andrew, was murdered. And she comes to the Care Farm and engages with our animals in a very, very beautiful way. They really love her, and I'll tell you more about them soon. So in terms of what was not helpful, respondents talked about the use of platitudes, judging or rushing grief, failure to approach or acknowledge loss, feeling abandoned by family, friends, and community members, avoidance of grief and griever, not listening, the perception that others were pretending the person who died never existed, a kind of avoidance, literal avoidance of a person, others' propensity to center their own needs and feelings, and offering unsolicited advice, especially about how to heal from grief. And one of the things that we found when we did a thematic analysis was that by far, 2 categories emerged in dominant themes, and they were emotional support. And they came down to acts of emotional caring and emotional support. Instrumental showed up as important as well, help with childcare, those kinds of practical things, and appraisal support, connecting with like others. But overwhelmingly, people preferred and needed emotional support. That's one of the things they knew they needed more than anything, not mental health support, emotional support. So we asked them about who was doing the best job at this. And in terms of, we broke it into 2 categories, acute care and long-term care. In the acute care, we found that 65% of mortuary staff got good or excellent ratings. 63% of hospice staff, 55 nurses, 47% for faith leaders. That was a little disappointing, I admit. 41% crisis response and first responders, 37% for law enforcement, 35 for physicians, and 35 for hospital social workers, which I admit being very sad about that. Long-term support, neighbors and community came in at a paltry 31%. Faith leaders came in at 32%. Even worse long-term for faith leaders, 40% for family. 31% colleagues, 32% faith leaders, 40% for family, 41% friends, 53% in-person support groups. Interestingly, online support groups rated 67%. Counselors and therapists only got 58%, and pets and animals came in at 89%. I want you to look at that 89% and compare it to all the other percentages. Pets and animals provided more support for grieving people than any human group, which was stunning to me. We ran those data a few times and checked everything. This is Caspian Janan, one of our rescue horses, and this is a grieving mom whose adult son died of a seizure. And I happened to snap this picture of her while she was at Sella Care Farm. And after I snapped the picture, she said, "This is the first time I've smiled when I felt the smile in my heart, really felt it." And what's amazing is if you look at Caspian is also smiling at the same time. And I didn't even see it until after I looked at the picture. And so here we have it in a graph where pets and animals ranked so much higher than every other human group. And this is why. So we went in and with a specific question, and we asked those 89% who ranked animals so high, can you explain to us what it is that animals bring that humans don't seem to be able to master? And predominantly, it was just their presence, that they were always there. They approached the person, they didn't turn away. They provided a sense of proximal comfort. They were willing witnesses of their grief, and they were a refuge from loneliness. They were non-judgmental, great listeners. In some cases, they felt like a connection to the person who died and a way to memorialize the person who died. And that the animal themselves shared grief. Like people were talking about their horses or their dogs or their cats who missed the person who died too. And it also gave people a caregiving identity sense. That was a little less predominant in the data, but it still was there. So in practice and without any words, animals seem better at providing the emotional support that grievers need, and humans don't seem to be doing a very good job. Thus, we have need for something in the nomenclatural system like a disorder to treat people for feeling their own sense of loneliness. In fact, one of the criteria in the prolonged grief disorder measure is asking about someone feeling lonely. And it begs the question, if I feel lonely, is that my fault, or is it a fallibility of the social system in which I'm existing? Animals also provide a sense of connection and a lightness without coercion or expectation. And the thing is, and this is where we're going to get into talking about the equitable and sustainable piece, that treatment as usual, what we're doing to treat grief, and frankly, the argument, I'll stay in my lane, but the argument could be made philosophically to treat many mental illnesses, many things that are called mental illnesses. Treatment as usual is neither sustainable nor equitable. This is from, and most of us haven't even ever seen this press release that was put out by the United Nations, their Human Rights Division, the Office of the High Commissioner. And this was actually published in 2017, but most people haven't even seen it. And here I just pulled out a couple of quotes. Mental health policies and services are in crisis. The status quo is unacceptable. It's not a crisis of chemical imbalance, but of power imbalances. We need bold political commitments, urgent policy responses, and immediate remedial action. And he goes on to say, the special rapporteur goes on to say, power and decision-making in mental health are concentrated in the hands of biomedical gatekeepers, particularly those representing biological psychiatry. These gatekeepers, supported by the pharmaceutical industry, maintain this power by adhering to two outdated concepts: that people experiencing mental distress and diagnosed with mental disorders are dangerous, and that biomedical interventions are medically necessary in many cases. These concepts perpetuate stigma and discrimination, as well as the practices of coercion that remain widely accepted in mental health systems today. There is now unequivocal evidence of the failures of a system that relies too heavily on the biomedical model of mental health services, including the frontline and excessive use of psychotropic medications, and that these models persist. Paternalistic and excessively medicalized concepts must give way to participatory psychosocial care and support in the community. And I could not agree more. Cost-effective and inclusive options with successful outcomes do exist and are being used around the world today. They just need to be scaled up and maintained. So this is not fringe. This is very important. So in what ways is treatment as usual not sustainable in the traditional sense? Well, the first line of treatment for that we see in terms of grief, and this was a study that we conducted in 2014, that about 37% of grieving mothers are prescribed psychiatric medication, the vast majority within 1 week after their child's death. Okay. And this is not a statement about anti-medication. It's a statement about anti-wanton medicating of bereavement, because there are no data that show that antidepressants are effective in treating bereavement. So when we look at what antidepressants are doing in our waterways, this is from Guller and Ford, and this was published in Aquatic Toxicology in 2010. So these are not new data, and this has been replicated. Exposure to the antidepressant fluoxetine causes shrimp to radically alter their behavior. Those exposed to fluoxetine become 5 times more likely to swim toward light than away from it. That change in behavior places them in harm's way. And if enough shrimp are exposed to the antidepressant, the entire population could be at risk. The problem is that crustaceans are a part of this ecological system that are really, really important. And what we do to the shrimp, we do to ourselves, as Chief Seattle says. What we do to the web of life, we do to ourselves. And the researchers go on to say that we're a nation of coffee drinkers, and there is a huge amount of caffeine in wastewater, for example. It's no surprise that what we get from the pharmacy will also be contaminating our waterways. So is the over-medication of society an ecological disaster? And my answer to that is, based on all the research that I've done, yes. Effluent-derived microcontaminants in agricultural runoff and emerging contaminants from wastewater treatments is a public health threat. Ecotoxicology is a pressing environmental concern for aquatic animals. So this is treatment as usual, and it's not working, and it's ecologically disastrous as well. It doesn't work for humans, but it's also not working for our environment, and we need other options. Phototoxic observed by runoff exposure, serotonin modulation. So it's a serotonergic modulation problem. Serotonergic drugs in runoff impact food consumption efficiency in different fish species, and interestingly, these pharmaceuticals bioaccumulate in their tissue. So when they do examinations of the fish post-mortem, they find a bioaccumulation. In carp, increased mortality was significant. Heart and kidney damage was observed, including significant brain pathology and oxidative stress that caused damage in their fat system. Amitriptyline exposure increased mortality risk in zebrafish offspring with parental exposure. So it has an intergenerational effect too. So the zebrafish who were exposed, their offspring had an increased mortality risk. And serotonergic activity in both vertebrates and invertebrates impact motor function, feeding, circadian rhythm, social interaction, all kinds of problematic behaviors that we're seeing in the ecological system. Treatment as usual isn't working. And of course, because bereavement is universal, you have every single human being who's ever lived and whoever will live in the future with the potential of being treated with a particular pharmaceutical. So in terms of the ecotoxin contamination of waterways, what we have to think about is, first of all, psychoactive medications for sure, and they enter through human excretion, urine and feces, improper disposal of unused or expired medications, which also happens, and agricultural runoff if livestock are treated with these drugs, which they often are. And common medications, of course, environmental impact. There are human health risks. Of course, while the concentration of these medications in drinking water are typically low, there are ongoing studies to examine the potential long-term health effects, especially on pregnant women and children. And unfortunately, traditional water treatment processes don't effectively remove all pharmaceuticals. So of course, they're researching how to do that, but we still have the effect on our aquatic life. So then what? So if treatment as usual is neither sustainable nor equitable, then what do we do? Well, there is a process called social prescribing. We have not yet picked up on it in the United States, of course. Psychiatry has a lot of power in the United States. I'm not anti-psychiatry. I'm psychiatry for appropriate situations. And grief is, to me, not a psychiatric issue. It's not a medical issue. Social prescribing is a process through which users with an identified health or social care are connected with a community setting to non-clinical services. And so it's community-based care, like community gardens, right? These are beautiful ways for human beings to connect, like peer counseling. I don't know if any of you have heard of one of my colleagues and friends, Dixon Chambande. He is a psychiatrist in Zimbabwe, and they had a whole influx of suicides in Zimbabwe, so much so that the psychiatrists weren't able to handle all of the patients who needed care. So he decided to conduct a randomized controlled trial. And basically what he did was he put grandmothers on a bench in a park, and he randomly assigned the patients who were capitally depressed to a psychiatrist or grandmothers in the park. And at the end of the study, looked at the outcomes for the patients, and the grandmothers in the park far outperform the psychiatrists. So social prescribing is being used in lots of different countries, not in the United States yet, but I'm hopeful that that will come. So currently, healthcare systems across the world tend to focus on the treatment of diseases rather than health promotion or prevention, with the use of pharmaceuticals as the most common intervention in healthcare. A large proportion of national, and this is from in the UK, right? So it's even more so. I will tell you, it's even more prevalent here in the United States. With increased spending on pharmaceutical interventions to treat ill health, their effectiveness, costs, and impacts on the climate, environment, and biodiversity are of rising concern. The carbon emissions alone, now we're not talking about runoff, we're just talking about carbon emissions, are more than that of the automotive industry. And their use correlates with the concentration of active pharmaceutical ingredients in terrestrial and aquatic environments. For these reasons, non-pharmaceutical health interventions and measures to support health and well-being are needed to help reduce the pressures of pharmaceutical consumption on planetary health. So I'm going to tell you about a study that was conducted. It was a longitudinal study. It was published in Lancet Planet Health. The study was a very robust sample, 2.3 million adults in Wales over 10 years. And what they found was that access to GBS, green and blue spaces, to nature, access to nature was associated with lower common mental health disorders like anxiety, depression in both those who were treated, quote, treated and untreated individuals. And interestingly, proximity effects had the highest impact. So in other words, the closer you were in distance to the green and blue spaces, the better overall emotional and mental health you had. And so I'm going to tell you about our sustainable alternative. It's called the Cella Care Farm. You can look us up online. We are also in episode 4 or 5 of Oprah Winfrey and Prince Harry's The Me You Can't See. All these pictures and all the pictures you've seen through today are here at our care farm. Our care farm rescues only. We don't reproduce, we only rescue. And all of our animals have been rescued from everything from homelessness to neglect to torture. This is Fiona with one of our clients here at the care farm. This is Gus. Current standards of practice are not sustainable. We found that 1 in 4 bereaved mothers was prescribed a psychiatric medication within 48 hours. Bereavers with no other place to go end up in a rush system, and they often end up inpatient facilities, which are, it's not. Our grieving families, actually, we had a grieving mother who was here not long ago who was put inpatient because her daughter died by suicide, and they put mom inpatient. They didn't know where else to take her. They hadn't heard of the care farm, and they put her inpatient and on a litany of medications, and told her last day, she was there for 30 days, and told her last day they wanted her to go to a group, but it was a different group. And this different group was newcomers who didn't sort of come in with her. And they explicitly told her, we don't want you to talk about your daughter who died because we don't want to trigger other people. And this kind of treatment for grieving people is not helpful if you think about the social constraints research I told you about earlier, right? Inpatient facilities are not the right places for grieving people. Grievers typically face emotionally stunted, rushed, and uncompassionate care that actually promotes unhealthy coping. lack of social support, loneliness, and disconnection. So this is Gus then, and this is Gus now. And so Gus is one of our rescue horses who now helps people and turns toward people. He used to be very afraid of people, and now he is not. So what helps? And these are the things at the care farm that help. Rescued rescued animals and nature help. Sorry, somehow those got flipped. Rescued animals and nature help. We know this over and over and over again. There's lots of research about nature, but in our data, something about our animals being rescued, something about these aren't just ordinary animals. They're animals who have known fear, known loss, been separated from their families, experienced trauma, experienced terror. And that comes out over and over. We have 8 published studies, 1 currently under review. So maybe 9 published studies on our intervention that's been around for 8 years. And it's very, very clear to us in our data, 100%, that these animals being rescued makes a difference for people. In fact, one of our clients here signs his emails to us, one of the rescued, David. And I'm just going to show you some pictures so you can see how powerful these interactions are. Art and expression help. We have an art therapist here. And being able to express your inner world outwardly helps. You don't need a diagnosis for that. This is a sustainable and equitable way to help people. Connection and mutual aid help. Supporting each other helps. Even human animal to non-human animal. This grieving mom her only child died, and she came to the farm, and the first 2 days she was pretty emotionally protective and didn't really open, didn't cry, was very guarded in the group setting, sat with her arms crossed, really very quiet. And on day 3, they went out for their time with the animals, and she asked if she could go and sit next to this little sheep. This is our sheep, Porcellina, and she lives at the care farm with her mother. Dolly Mama is her mom's name. And she asked if she could go sit next to her. And the animals are never forced to interact with humans because we are anti-speciesist and we take a very egalitarian approach with the animals, but we always invite the animals to relationship. And so she went and sat next to Porcellina, and then she kind of laid her head on her, and then she laid over her just like this and started to weep. And it was the first time she opened her emotions, was to this little sheep who held space for her and sat with her like this for almost an hour, just like this for almost an hour. Group work helps in a similar way as the mutual aid. Restorative spaces help. This is our grotto area where people can light a candle, a soy candle, where they can pray or meditate. They can burn incense. They can just go and sit and just be quiet. Meaningful work helps. And of course, exercise helps. And we know this from the data over and over again. And when you're on a 20-acre farm, it's pretty hard not to move your body. We have gardens, more meaningful work, a little less glamorous, but still meaningful. These are farm to table gardens, and some of our clients helping us build them. And moving our bodies together. Contemplative time helps. Quiet, pulling our energy inward helps. Contemplative time here in our yoga room. Ritual helps. One of our rituals is walking barefoot. We have lots of different rituals on the farm. We have a cloudy tree where people can tie a piece of fabric with a prayer in it. We have a medallion tree where people can hammer the name of their beloved into a medallion that goes into a tree that moves with the wind. We have our labyrinth walk And each one of these sticks has a beloved dead person's name. We have a lot of Native clients. About 26% of our clients here at the Care Farm are Native. They particularly love this nature-based intervention because of its egalitarian approach and decolonizing approach. And so we allow our Native clients to lead their own ceremony if they want. Psychoeducation helps, learning helps. This is people can understand their own bereavement experience. It's scary when the world is telling you there's something wrong with you because 2 months after your child died, it's hard for you to go down the cereal aisle at the grocery store. And the world is telling you that's not okay. But then you learn from others, oh no, that's perfectly normal when your child has died. Or for someone whose spouse has died, having a hard time going out with the couples they used to go out with. When someone shares with you, oh, that's okay, that's part of the process, it's really relieving for us to know that we are okay, even though we aren't. And we do a lot of psychoeducation here at the farm. We do a lot of teaching to grieving people and a lot of teaching to providers who come to learn more. And competent and compassionate care help. And this is important because this is really, social workers have an important role to play here, as well as medical providers with people whose beloveds are dying. For example, in this one study, a parent-clinician communication and prolonged grief in parents whose child died for cancer, compared to parents who wanted more prognostic information. Parents who perceived information to be adequate had significantly lower prolonged grief sum scores. In other words, actually just good communication with your medical providers can be protective against prolonged grief. It's very interesting, but this whole prolonged grief thing, instead of saying what's broken in this person's system, in this person's environment, what happened to them as their loved one was dying or when their loved one died, what happened to them or what's happening to them as they're trying to navigate, have people averted their gaze and turned away from them? And rather than examining that, we are a very victim blaming society. We blame people for not blossoming in soil that is poor soil, that is not well nourished, that isn't getting enough sun or doesn't have enough nitrogen. And even bird songs help. This is a really interesting study that I actually just came across, and I'm not surprised by it, of course, but it's a beautiful study. It says, concerning bird song conditions, depression exclusively decreased after exposure to the high diversity soundscape. In other words, people with capital D depression had lower depression scores when they were exposed to high diversity bird calls. Anxiety and paranoia significantly decrease with birdsong conditions with medium effect sizes, while the noise of traffic is conversely related to higher depressive rates, which certainly makes sense. And yet we expect people to function in these big cities and with all of this stress and with very little access to the natural world. So in terms of an equitable and sustainable mental health care system, I prefer emotional healthcare system, of course. Other considerations, because we take an anti-colonial lens, we jettison vernacular like treatment. We don't say this is treatment. This isn't treatment. We prefer words like care or community-based care. And of course, all of our work is around egalitarianism and balancing the power between people who are grieving and the people who are providing that care to them, as well as the non-human animals who are here for care, and balancing that power. From our perspective, the only way to ensure an equitable and sustainable shift from the current treatment as usual toward a more mindful way of caring for people is to lobby insurers to provide supportive care in lieu of treatment predicated on a diagnosis. So in other words, the whole idea with prolonged grief disorder, and probably many of the disorders, the intention is probably good. Let's make sure people get, quote, treatment. The problem is treatment is neither equitable or sustainable. Instead, maybe rather than putting all of our efforts and energy into creating new diagnoses, perhaps we should get together these really smart people and really powerful universities and institutions and accrediting agencies and lobby insurers to pay for supportive care without needing a diagnosis. The nomenclatural system itself is woefully broken. And of course, we need to educate the public. Social constraints, remember, impact physical outcomes in bereavement, but also psychological outcomes in bereavement. And from Bolen in Northern Europe found, quote, negative cognitions about one's grief was the only variable predicting membership to the prolonged grief disorder class. And we know this. Decolonizing the system is consistent with social work practice. Social work is all about context, and the DSM is all about acontextual. And yet still somehow this sort of persists. In terms of clinical implication, the status quo may actually incite more loneliness for grievers. And importantly, as the United Nations Special Counsel said, there are alternatives. There are all alternatives to medicalizing bereavement. And for that matter, there are alternatives to the, quote, treatment, to the care of veterans. There are alternatives to our treatment as usual of people who live without a home. There are alternatives to many things that face people that cause suffering that are more sustainable and more equitable. Integrating ecological factors into research aligns with social work practice values. Despite the structural problems with the mental health system, providers are obligated. So despite all of the problems, we have to practice in accord with ethical values. And in most fields, but certainly in social work, this is contextual, person and environment. What bereaved people really need is good support, particularly emotionally intelligent support and interconnectedness, and not surveillance and diagnosis. For social workers, from Duane in 2011, for social workers considering sustainability, both psychosocial and environmental, is our duty. It's the ultimate social justice issue, Duane says. And so from our care farm, compassion is medicine, animals are medicine, community is medicine, movement is medicine, trees are medicine, sleep, healthy food, silence, love, and remembering our dead, all medicine. And I'm getting close to the end, so I want to tell you about our own research. We conducted a study and we looked at, it was sort of a broad, open-ended study at the end. We asked qualitative, is there anything more you want to say? And as we were reading through the themes, what we saw was a theme for more healthy lifestyle choices was coming clear very easily in the data. And so we actually published a study, Care Farming as a Catalyst for Healthy and Sustainable Lifestyle Choices in Those Affected by Traumatic Grief. I definitely think there's some quotes, definitely think I live more intentionally after visiting the care farm. I find myself not throwing away as much food and altering how I think about what goes into my body. I'm noticing plants and trees and animals and sounds like I've never noticed them before. I actually drink less because I'm too busy dealing with my emotion. I'm eating more plants. I never knew animals had emotions. I've stopped drinking alcohol except on special occasions. I've lost the weight that I gained using food to comfort my pain. I think I feel more connected to animals and even nature. Even the trees in our yard that I barely noticed before, I now notice. I no longer drink because I want to experience the full range of emotions and work through them in a healthy way. So from Kaplan in the 80s talked about attention restoration theory, that nature restores attention and diminishes stress through the generation of awe and wonder, extending connection to all things. And that's what the Sella Care Farm is all about. It's about, just because we have grief doesn't mean we can't experience awe and wonder. And that's one of the things that people say when they come here, is that it feels so safe to experience the bottom dropping out, all of their grief and all of their pain. They don't feel like they have to hide in shame what they really feel. And because of that, they'll stand at the top of the property and look at the sunset and start to cry. And you ask them, tell me about what you're feeling now. And they're just like, just such beauty and wonder. And that's the amazing thing about their experiences here, is that by opening themselves to all of their emotions, the top comes up when the bottom comes down, and everything gets bigger, everything opens. And that's what Kaplan's theory was. So I want to encourage you, there's a beautiful book called Restoring the Kinship View by two native scholars, Topa and Narvaez. And they talk about restoring the kinship worldview. And I've just summarized their findings here in the book, but it's a beautiful book that I encourage you to read. Another one too that I really love, if those of you who work in trauma, is called Decolonizing Trauma Work by Renee Linklater, a native scholar. So focus on spirit. All beings are sacred and have spirit. All beings, not just human beings, all beings. Become healthy, establishing good relationships with everything in nature, openness, humility, and respect, focusing on interdependence and interconnectedness, group healing, circling up with like others, and passing the talking stick. That individual health hinges on social health. Intergenerational trauma and its effects are very real, realizing that every person's healing is situated in the nest of relationships and responsibilities. Restore the emotional. Remember it, and in fact, I don't believe Topa and Narvaez know about our particular research study on emotional support and how important it was to grieving people. But they actually say this: restore the emotional. Heart learning in lieu of thinking is central to being relationally connected. Respect all beings' worth, no diagnosing, labeling, and each being is sacred. Talking isn't always necessary, and we know this, right? So animals came out at 89%, way higher than any human group. Guess what? Animals can't talk. They speak in different language, but they don't talk. They don't use words. Words are what get human beings in trouble a lot of the time, right? So talking isn't always necessary. And the importance of the land, the best place to learn accommodation to all one's relations, getting to know the land. You can learn more about our work here. This is my actual website, just my name.com, Sell a Care Farm, sellacarefarm.com or .org. And Miss Foundation is the nonprofit that runs the Care Farm. These are three of our horses, Chamaco, Stormy, and Scout, our little clown. And I will close, and I think maybe we'll have time for just a couple of questions. But this is a poet, John O'Donohue, and this is one of our native clients here at the farm who is holding ceremony in the river after the death of his son. May we learn to return and rest in the beauty of animal being, learn to lean low and leave our locked minds, and with freed senses feel the earth breathing with us. May we learn to walk upon the earth with all their confidence and clear-eyed stillness, so that our minds might be baptized in the name of the wind and the light and the rain.
This was unparalleled. Thank you so much, Dr. Cacciatore, for bringing all of this heart and care-centered work to us. It's truly astounding. We'll continue to process through it, as I'm sure others will as well. And thank you for being open to questions. I would love to use our time in that way. If you do have a question, you're welcome to raise your hand. I suppose that might be the easiest way. Otherwise, we'll just invite you to come off of mute. Thank you, Linda. I see your hand.
Hi, thank you so much. I totally didn't expect this at all. So this has been a fabulous session so far.
Thank you.
I'm curious so you're dealing with traumatized animals, and probably in many cases, what kind of work do you do with the animals before you expose them to the people?
Yes, well, we have a whole system here. We first ensure that they are totally safe and they are never coerced to interact with anyone other than the vet. So we give them lots of space. Now we have a pig, for example, we've rescued. Her name is Maisie Peaches. We call her our hippo pig. She's a very big girl and her belly brushes on the ground. And we've had her 5 years and she still really doesn't want human contact. And so we tell our clients, just stay back from Maisie. She really doesn't want human beings to approach her, but you can observe her. You can go sit under the willow tree. We have had a few times where clients have done that, sat under the willow tree, and maybe day 2 or day 3 of them doing that, she'll get a little curious and she'll walk up and she'll start to sniff them a little bit, but never really quite gets very close. So basically we give them absolute liberty to do what they want to do, when they want to do it, and when they're ready to do it, they can interact. And if they never want to interact, then they never have to interact. There is no coercion for any human or non-human here at the farm. In terms of, usually we sequester them where they're kind of surrounded by the other animals, but they feel safe. So they have a little safe zone. So they're in a fenced area so they can get away, because there are lots of animals here. We have 54, I believe. And so they all gather around curiously when a new one is rescued, and it can feel a little overwhelming. And so we want them to have plenty of space. So we usually put them in a really big sequester pen and then they have an indoor space where if they're feeling overwhelmed, then they can go inside and get away from them. But the vast majority of our animals are gentled within a week. It's amazing how forgiving they are. It really is amazing. Chamaco, one of our most tortured horses, was being used in a very brutal way as a pack animal and had his spinal processes were actually exposed. He had bone coming through his skin and his hips. And within probably 7 to 10 days, he was allowing me to hug him, which was it was amazing. He was 600 pounds underweight as well. So they're very forgiving. And I think they know compassion and love when they feel it, much like we as humans do, right? Yeah. Thank you for the question. And it is an important point of scholarship, and that is considering the welfare of the non-human animals as well. So thank you for bringing that forward, Linda.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
Sometimes people want to know, and I'll briefly just say this, sometimes people want to know how people get here. And we do have a scholarship fund. So about 60% of our clients, because we've never turned anyone away for inability to pay. So about 60% of our clients are scholarshiped. Indigenous people never pay for anything here. And so they are all scholarshiped here. And so we make it accessible to everyone. I could never imagine turning anyone away. And so in 8 years, we've never had to turn anyone away. There is a documentary being filmed about us as well. Well, it's already been filmed. It's coming out soon. But you can look at the trailer on YouTube. It's called Selah, S-E-L-A-H. And the producer is named John Bregel, B-R-E-G-E-L. So you can look it up if you're wanting to watch the trailer. It's very emotional, just so you know.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And I'm so grateful to hear that the word is getting out about the care farm. And I'm wondering if you're hearing from others who are using your incredible and deep level of research. Are you seeing this replicated in other places? And
yes, and we're training people. So we have a sister care farm that uses our model. The model is the regenerative health social model. And it's a social model that's all about sustainability and equity, right? And good care, compassion for all beings. And so we have a sister care farm that's using our model in Knoxville, Tennessee. We have another one that's actually currently forming in Northern California. We have one that's getting ready to launch in Michigan. We have one that's just buying the property in Massachusetts. So we're getting there. Yes, we are getting there. The idea is to promulgate this as much as we can. Yeah.
Amazing. And thank you for all of your levels of engagement and the ways in which you're getting the word out beyond the social work community, as very much you are doing so within it. And we're truly grateful for your willingness to give us this talk. You came so highly recommended from your colleague, and
Thank you.
I'm very grateful to make your connection and to have you here today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for joining me. I know it's not the easiest thing to talk about, but I really am very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you so much, Dr. Cacciatore.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. That was truly so powerful. And thank you. I see all of the notes in the chat for Dr. Cacciatore, and I'll be sure to send those along in case she didn't get the chance to see them. I'm grateful to welcome a friend and colleague, Heather Peavy, and allow Heather to introduce herself and bring us through a bit more mindfulness and grounding. Thank you, Heather.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really interesting to hear so far, and it's a real treat to be a part of this symposium. My name's Heather Peavy, and I'm a wellness practitioner in Manhattan. I do personal training, Pilates, breath work, and mindfulness, mostly with a senior population. I'm currently in my second year of master's program at Fordham to get an MSW, and probably will take the mindfulness and the MSW together somehow. I'm not quite sure yet. In light of what we've been talking about, I thought we'd do, for a little brain break, a small stretch portion, and then a little box breathing, which is probably a tool many of you know, something that I use with both my high school students in my internship and my seniors to regulate the nervous system. So we're going to start, if you'll indulge me, sitting tall in the chair, feet flat on the floor. And often all of us, whether we're in school, professors, or any kind of social worker, is very hard on the body. It's a lot of forward pull for the head. So we're going to start sitting tall, feet flat on the floor. Take your hands as if you were grabbing around your ribs. We're going to bring the fingers to the front of the ribs and the thumb to the back. Then relax the shoulder. Z, plural. Slow inhale and see if you can feel your ribs expand outwards. And then slow exhale, feel the ribs slightly pull together. Slow inhale, shoulders stay down away from the ears. Slow exhaling, feel the ribs moving. So we'll go through a few more breaths, trying to feel that movement of the ribs. If possible, try the breath now with the mouth closed, just breathing through the nose. Inhaling, ribs expand through the nose, then keeping the mouth closed, exhaling, ribs pull together, and relax the arms down by your sides. Sitting up tall, shoulders down and back, turn the palms to face forward and really stretch the arms away from the body. Think about the head perched right on top of the shoulders. Gently drop your right ear to your right shoulder. It's a small movement. Should feel like a good stretch in the left shoulder, left side of the neck. Left hand is reaching away. Come back to center. Gently drop left ear to left shoulder. Try to breathe just as we did before, with the ribs expanding and contracting. And back to center. Arms still down by your sides. Look over your right shoulder without moving the shoulders. Slow back to center. Look over the left shoulder. Think about the chin staying down as you alternate looking right and left. Back to that breath, if possible. Lips stay closed, so you're just breathing in and out through your nose. Back to center, keep the chest open. One more time to the right. And one more time over the left shoulder. Back to center. Now, if you've been sitting all day, and this is a continuation of sitting all day, can you grab your right ankle, lift it up over the left thigh, like you were doing a sort of indelicate leg cross. So that right ankle now is set up upon your left thigh. You can gently press the right knee down with your right hand. Think about sitting up tall and feeling that stretch. If you're pretty comfortable in this range of motion, take a little lean forward with the upper body. That lean forward should feel like a big stretch in butt on the right side. Slowly come back up. If you're really flexible, you can lean a little farther forward, gently stretching forward and slowly back up. Change sides. We'll notice if one hip feels way worse or way better than the other. Other ankle